This is our special interview. Today we're going to take a look at the topic of quantum computing. And for those of you who follow things like this, it's definitely a buzzword these days as it's being deemed the key future technology that can do very complex things that classic supercomputers probably can't do. But it might be a complex subject to certain people, me included. So let's find out more about this. We have invited Dr. Ahmed Benefa, who is a professor of general engineering at San Jose State University. Let's say hi to him right now. Hi, thanks for joining us, Professor.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes, so can we talk about this as kind of a definition first? What exactly is quantum computing or quantum computers?
Well, quantum computing or quantum computers is actually the next step for the computing power we have. What we have now is the classical computers that basically built based on math. The quantum computing is built on physics. So that's the major difference between the two.
I see. And so what about this term called qubits? What exactly is this?
Well, it's one way to distinguish the classical computers principles from the quantum computing. When you talk about classical computers, you're talking about bits, which is can take two values, zeros and ones. In the case of the quantum computing, you're talking about qubit, which can take multiple values. It could be 0 and 1 at the same time. Let me explain it in an example. Mm-hmm. Let's say that you are in a maze and you have to open a door to get to the next, room so you can leave that maze.
Okay.
In the classical computers, you have to open a door and check if it's going to take you to the next one. If not, you open the other door. That's going to take you time until you get out from that maze. This is the classical computer. In the quantum computer, you have the ability to open all the doors at the same time. So you can get out right away. That's the difference between the two views here.
I see. Well, thanks for explaining it so easily for our listeners. So what are some of the possible real-life applications of quantum computing in our daily lives?
We're still far away from that, even with the advancement we are seeing here, because there is few milestones that we have to be aware of when we talk about the quantum computing. The latest chip from IBM is talking about 127 qubit. I will be worried about the existing infrastructure of the internet and the security of the internet if we hit 2000 qubit, which is still far away from 127, even though in 2019, we have 53 qubit as the number there, so it's going exponentially. So we're not that far. We're talking about something like 10 years and we get there. Now, some of the application, to answer your question about the application, we can have a quantum internet, which is more secure, more faster, using the photons instead of the electrons when you are sending the information back and forth. We can have the quantum cryptography, which is going to secure it way better than what we have now, so the hackers cannot even get into our accounts.
Definitely good news, I guess, in the future. So in terms of, you already mentioned, a major company, IBM's announcement on its quantum processor. So, is this a real milestone? Do you think that this is a big jump into the future of what, I guess, quantum computing will be in the future?
I believe that this is a really good step. There is a competition between IBM and Microsoft and Google. Google claimed that they reached something called the quantum supremacy, and the term quantum supremacy is translated to a calculation that will take 10,000 years by a classical supercomputer. The quantum computer can do it in 200 seconds. And this is what happened with Google. Now, as I said, the growth of the qubit is exponential. It's not linear. So the next step could be, 300 qubit, and I know that from the information from IBM that they're looking on the 400 qubit, which is really a big advancement. But that comes with a lot of challenges, to the quantum computing. It's not as straightforward just building it and selling it.
So what are some of those challenges? Because from what I understand, it's not a perfect science, right?
Well, the challenge is because you are talking about quantum physics and quantum mechanics, you are dealing with, with a situation where any kind of interferences with electromagnetics that can change the value right away. So you can have the wrong answers. And also, this is the famous principle in quantum computing, and I'm sure that some of your listeners that they are really an expert in that one. You cannot observe the quantum status. If you observe it, you change it. You have to just look at the result at the end of the process. Now, I want to add one thing here, Catherine, when we talk about the quantum computing.
Okay.
In my book, I discuss this kind of a direction of what's going on with computing. Mm-hmm. The current computers built based on mathematics, the Boolean algebra, the zeros and ones, the computer science, they understand that concept. We are hitting the physical limitation of the number of the transistors on that chip, and we are getting to the maximum, so we have to think about something else. So we are moving from math to physics. And that physics is now translated into the quantum computing. I looked at it in the future within like 15 years, 20 years from now, we might go to biology. We might go to chemistry as the basis for our computation. And there are a lot of computer, scientists working on computation based on the DNA. DNA is the most complex machine that can use to store and process data. So the STEM itself, math, physics, biology, and chemistry are the basis for the future of computing.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think that this is the new future in terms of computing? Yes.
I think we're gonna see in 10 years, we're gonna see something which is, we consider it as the consumer level, because now you can buy, a small scale quantum computing that have limited number of qubit, as a commercial, as a business. But as a consumer, we are not yet there. And once we get there, we have to change everything. You have to have quantum routers, quantum hubs, quantum, communications among the different pieces of the internet.
So I know you just mentioned it, but just so our listeners are better aware, when do you think we, the layperson, will have some fairly, some access to this type of computing, not as a business, but as an individual?
With the 2030 will be a reasonable target for us to get there.
Okay.
Because a lot of things going to happen in 2030. We're talking about 6G. We're talking about, quantum computing. We're talking about so many things. 10 years from now, that will be, enough time for the technology to mature and develop. And the competition among the big tech companies in the Silicon Valley is really giving us a big push about this one, because they know that the investment and the return on investment is huge when you're talking about quantum computing.
Yes. Any last words you have for our listeners before I let you go, Professor?
Well, enjoy the future. It's coming, and it's going to be quantum.
All right. Thank you so much for breaking it down for us today, and take care, Professor.
Thank you.
This was Professor Ahmed Benefa, and we talked about why quantum computing, it's been making headlines in the past weeks. So he broke it down as easily as possible so that we as lay people could understand it.